Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. Hey everybody, welcome back. You guys know what it is. It is your favorite TV, movie, comic, and music reaction show. It is X's for show, and we are here today to talk comics. As for me, I'm Nico, and you can check me out at Nico Action. That's NICOACTION.
And I'm TK. You can find me at TK Elemental.
And I'm your producer in the corner. You can find me at Kev O'Reilly.
And I am so stoked today to talk about, and this is the official stoked hands, I guess, because we are going to be talking about something we haven't gotten to talk about in a couple of weeks. That is new comics. That is new comics that I feel like really want me to think they're going to have impact. Remains to be seen, but I'm here to do the debatery.
And that's really all we can do at this point.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think like with the big question, do these big initiatives like the new Ultimate Universe, Fall of the House of Usher of X, even the current run of the Omnis being printed, do you feel like Marvel has a specific goal in their future right now? And it's a pretty stellar, they're telling us to trust the big picture. And so like, you know, one of the things that people don't always understand is that oftentimes with comics, stuff is done like 2, 3, 4 years in advance. The plotting, the conceptual work can be 8, 9 years down the line. And by the time the guy who releases it gets it out the door, it's the 8th person to have hands on it. It's the 18th iteration of the story. And the people who were editorial assistants back then are now top #1 writers and are doing their own thing instead of ensuring this corporate legacy idea gets off the ground. So, do I think they have a specific goal in their future? I actually likened this earlier today talking to superfan Tori. I actually really liken this to the incredible lost period Marvel experienced just before Disassembled. The lost period that DC entered just after they were like, oh my God, Identity Crisis was actually good. Everybody, we have a crisis. And we're excited. No, it's not a bad thing, guys. Crises are good here. And, you know, it was one of those moments. But I think this is flailing, praying for somebody to find you floating down the Delaware water gap in your inner tube because you've been separated from your Boy Scout troop for what must be 2 hours at this point, and you've been floating by yourself because you went down the wrong bend in the river. And this very nice Swedish couple who's on their honeymoon find you, and they keep being concerned that you're going to be attracted to her, and then they realize you're not, and that's fine. And he's very friendly, and then they get you to shore and they find your Boy Scout troop. I mean,
how are you still alive sometimes? They
thought I was missing for hours.
Why aren't you a YouTube video? Other than this, I mean.
So this is also born out of you talking to me about your DC reading, and your thoughts on. You gotta straighten up because you have to answer this question. And your thoughts on DC's current kind of status quo and where their aims are, and you've been kind of grooving on DC a little bit lately. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering sort of what you're feeling about the differences between the two and the feeling of, are we goal oriented or not? And is that a good thing or a bad thing?
You know, one of the Problems has to do with the organic nature of classic storytelling versus the manufactured nature of marketing storytelling now. They decided one day that in order to simplify storytelling, to update stories to the Silver Age instead of being trapped by those Golden Age standards, that the DC universe simply switched Earths. And since this particular issue of Batman, we've been following this other version of Batman. And since this arbitrary issue of Superman, and they never said when it was until much later, they were like, oh, it's basically that issue. For some people, it's where they have a deleted brother, where, you know, for many issues, Batman had a brother, I think it's Thomas Wayne, and then he just stops existing and he just doesn't exist anymore. And then that Batman goes on to have his own stories, but DC arbitrarily changed the timeline. And that, of course, led to some chaotic issues, which they tried to sort out with 1985's response to Secret Wars, Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is landmark and excellent and magical in all of its own special ways. But it ultimately meant that the DC universe had the ability to pretend it had brand new continuity that was just like a best of itself. Marvel's never done it. They've just never done it. Heroes Reborn did it for a handful of characters and then shunted them back like a Nico down the Delaware water gap. The Heroes Reborn era really was a manufactured experiment in a positive way, not coming for the corporate nature of it, but instead acknowledging that we wouldn't have a lot of the successes we had, like Marvel Knights later on. I think this is flailing. But I think it's because they're realizing how many of their plans are no longer capable of keeping up with the speed of Daredevil spoilers. Like, I swear to God, I've already seen Daredevil Born Again. It's called Twitter, and you can watch the whole fucking show, which I'm not mad about except for who I haven't seen. So if you're asking me, do I think these initiatives indicate that Marvel has a game plan right now? No, I think they're trying to like Game of Thrones it. I think they're trying to put like the, you know, pokers in like 9 fires and hope for the best. And I'm feeling real iffy on these results.
Interesting. I guess I'm basically in the same boat. It doesn't the one thing that I feel like is I think I get this air like they keep trying to trick me and be like, no, we totally have a plan. Like, we have one goal and we're totally going for it. And you know, like, we're all set up, these, like, everything's in motion, going exactly how we want. And it just, that feels like the messaging, but it is just not what I'm getting out of anything. And it's all the way from little things like just still not being able to smooth out editorial timing issues, which is something we're going to talk about with a book that came out today, all the way to like putting so many eggs in the God's basket and then just not having any follow through or any plan for not the most positive response ever. It just and like I feel like more and more creators, editors are out in, what do you got?
Have you ever, like, and maybe not you personally, but have you ever in the course of your senior year of college lost like 105 pounds? And when you show up at a party, you're kind of like, hey, everybody, skinny Nico. And they're all like, yeah, I've got Facebook, fine. And they just sort of like blow past you. And like, you're sort of like, no, tell me I'm pretty now. And everybody's kind of like, nah, man, you've done pretty before. Calm down. That's God's.
It was senior year of high school. I graduated college in 3 years, so I did not have a senior year. Senior year of high school, and there was not really as much social media back then. So actually, it was a very big deal. Mostly everybody just thought I was on cocaine, and they weren't 100% wrong. Yeah, Gods is kind of that. Like it, but I also really blame that. Like the story you tell is of earnestness, is of somebody who's really like, I really tried and I want some acknowledgement. And I'm not getting that same earnestness from Gods.
Well, I think a little bit for me, that's because John Hickman isn't saying, thanks for coming to my show. I really appreciate it. And if you're going to be in the front row, could you tip? I just really feel like John Hickman is, well, because part of the problem is John Hickman isn't really a corporate comics guy. John Hickman is a big, brilliant guy. He is a giant ideasman. And it just happens that the people who have the budget to support his ideas for many years have been corporate comics. But I really feel like one of the things that we see from John Hickman is John Hickman doesn't play well with others in a way that leaves as much room for their storytelling. You know, Tori Amos only has a handful of proper duets in her career, and it's because you don't want to sing with Tori Amos. Like, you don't. And that's not an attack on Tori Amos, but you're not going to match her. And she doesn't want to match your whatever the fuck you do.
But I'm going to throw out there too, we didn't get a band tour for a really long time between 2009 and the most recent one in 2022. And a big part of that is because she doesn't want anybody else to deal with. And I feel like that's also very Hickman.
Yeah. You know, it's as I'm making my way downtown, walking fast, Green Lanterns pass, and it turns out they do not spend as much time in Coast City. Okay, we're going to get to that, but especially with when we talk about Ultimate Black Panther. But one of the fucking craziest things I've ever seen is, so I've read about 208 stories of Green Lantern between Green Lantern Volume 2, some Justice League, a handful of Brave and the Bold. So I've read like 110 issues of Green Lantern proper, and then a bunch of tie-ins. And part of why I bring this up is because he's in Coast City at this point. Of the 200-something issues I've read, maybe 70. He is with Carol Ferris, maybe 70. The only villain who's shown up with great frequency is Sinestro, thank God. But because Sinestro is like the perfect little man, right? Hey guys, it's my little man.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I cannot help but think about is the way that John Hickman is like a lot of the guys from the classic era of comics where you had to be good at everything. And so I see, for better or for worse, Bill Willingham's name all over DC. Like the storyline that introduces Parallax, you know, the time Hal Jordan was actually interesting, is Green Lantern Volume 3, number 48. And it runs 48, 49, and 50. Bill Willingham, creator and only writer of Fables, drew Green Lantern 48 that introduces Parallax. So, like, when you think about people who have to do everything, Hickman probably could. Hickman probably could draw his own Parallax. But I just don't think Hickman could draw as well as Hickman can write. And so he needs him some Chichery. He needs him some Pepe Larraz. Just like we needs us some Candyman and Tasty Cake, both of which sound like things designed to put me in a hypoglycemic coma.
Yes.
So to that end, we've got Jonathan Hickman, architect of a new Ultimate Universe, starting it off, writing the first 4-issue mini, one shot to really get us all tied in, and then we go branching paths. Hickman takes the Spider-Man path. We got Brian Hill now doing
Hickman takes Spider-Man path. Brian Hill coming up on the Ultimate Black Panther path with Peter Momoko coming up on Ultimate X-Men on the rear.
Thank you. Very, very accurate.
Okay.
And I'm wondering, is this the zone? Is this the right amount of collaboration where Hickman has been able to be architect of a big idea and take a flagship title, but relinquish some control of other books that will ultimately result in more world building, and therefore this becomes a more collaborative thing. And I'm trying to kind of compare it to House of X and Powers of 10 and the Krakoan era, where I don't know, I guess it sort of felt like a lot more of that was on Hickman's shoulders, and that might just be a perception thing. But even though we had other writers taking other books after we did House and Powers, it really felt like the Hickman vision. And I just don't feel like reading this Black Panther that it is so much like the Hickman vision that somebody else is writing on his behalf.
Well, I want to start then with number one. I really want to do new Ultimate MC2-niverse, where it's like the new universe of ultimating the MC2, and I just think that that's
I mean, I desperately want to do that. The only thing I want, like, it's also, it was really crazy that you mentioned Heroes Reborn in terms of like attempts by Marvel to do some kind of reset, because after Heroes Reborn, I think they get cold feet and try and do the next best thing, which is MC2, which also fails, but they then try again with the Ultimate Universe. So Marvel has always been too scared to say 616 resets for realsies or changes huge for real. Yeah. But I think if they ever created something that people were like, no, this is the one, man, we want to follow this universe, they would be like, good deal. All our money's in on it, and we'll just let 616 slowly fade into the background.
I need to pause. And so, you know, I need to ask Candyman, why you ask that? What
did he ask?
I haven't read Ultimate Black Panther, but is it a crossover with Moon Knight? Because here's where
look at the background of the
moon.
I just want to make sure, because like you could look at the moon and think it's the moon. Like you could, you know,
it's the Eye of Horus.
But so I love that, because like I don't think everybody saw it coming. I think people who look for things see things coming. Mm-hmm. But you know, part of where I feel like we are really at a fascinating place with exactly what you're saying is, when I think about Jonathan Hickman and his singular vision for a universe, I have a hard time imagining divorcing those significant characters from his reach. So taking a Black Panther, or as is implied in this title, possibly Storm, off the table for John Hickman almost seems counterintuitive to who I think John Hickman is. So when I read a lot of the things that happen in Ultimate Black Panther, such hot topics and hot properties at Marvel right now, like Moon Knight, Black Panther, Storm, all coming up here. And then characters like Shuri and Okoye, who are so central to the identity of Black Panther being at play here. I'm left thinking that one of two things is happening. This is a short form experiment, and after 12 issues, after the 3 months in the bubble or whatever, we're going to just reset everything. Sure. Or Marvel is not that worried about the MC unification at this point.
I mean, Ultimates definitely is taking us really far away from MC unification. Which is something that I find really interesting. And I think it's kind of a meet in the middle. I do think this countdown to Maker coming back out of the city in the final confrontation will be sort of a check-in. How were sales? Was anybody into this? Are we doing anything with it? This is probably enough for a couple omnibuses. What's being
I think we need to start calling them by their proper name, omnibuses, if we could
I
just please.
I do prefer that.
Thank you.
And if nothing else, now we've just got another universe to toy around with. They can bring Maker in as a Kang Doom level villain, which he has been
Kang
in the
Doom.
past. And I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where this goes, but it is something that I keep coming back to in my head when I'm reading a series, which is just like, this is not. I'm surprised we're not doing a thing where it's like, hey, we went to this other universe that looks so much more like the MCU, that now is like our favorite pal universe that we go to all the time. That makes the MCU more present in, on the pages of comics as we see them today.
And when I think about how the I guess Ultimate Avengers, this new Ultimates, are pushing far away from the MC unification theory, I also have to wonder about what Avengers Twilight is doing. I almost really, really wonder if we're gearing up for some sort of like massive kind of crisis with Avengers Twilight, with the current Marvel Universe, with the new Ultimate Universe. I really think with things like the current Weapon X-Men on the heels of original X-Men, which we think is the repurposing of new X-Men, which we didn't get the preview of in November. All of these chain reactions, these resultant, things, I feel like and then just on top of it, Rob Liefeld is purposefully retiring from Deadpool. I just think there are so many things that are really pointing to a new era where things are going to be different, and you can either be cool with it or not. And I don't know.
I guess the bigger question is it a whimper or a bang transition into the new era? Because what you're talking about, like, I like Avengers Twilight, and I would be very happy to see something come out of it. But right now, I don't think anything is going to. I think it's going to be a really good mini that has some pullable threads that will not be immediately like, you can see where all these threads lead to the following month in this book, or even 3 months from now in this book. I think they're just kind of going to be left there. And in 2 years, when Al Ewing writes a Thor story that mentions the stuff that was in Avengers Twilight, we'll be like, oh, wow, that's great. Al Ewing is such a card like that. The current incarnation of Avengers, as written by Jed MacKay, I think is close to recognizable as MCU characters. I mean, they're all there. It's Carol, it's Sam.
That's definitely the Avengers title.
I mean, it is. It's not. It doesn't feel like a flagship Avengers title, but it is the flagship Avengers title. And it's the one that looks most like the MCU Avengers that we know. Ultimates, again, I just don't know, but like, for me, none of this is signaling a cohesive direction for a new era. I can see how all of these things could stack up to get us there, but it's so chaotic. I'm not feeling like, okay, we just gotta use Avengers Twilight as the springboard that XYZ. And similarly, I'm just like, all I know is in July we're doing From the Ashes. In July, all of these storylines ostensibly will be wrapped up that we introduced for Krakoa, minus all of the storylines that we will never wrap up because that's just comics, but still some of them annoy me. But we're wrapping up, and then we're doing From the Ashes. I don't know what From the Ashes is. I don't know what any of it looks like. I don't know how anything I read day to day is really fitting into a driving plan towards From the Ashes, or is like showing me what From the Ashes will be like. I just know I have a name and that's where we're going at a certain date. And that to me is that kind of like, do we technically have a direction? Sure. But yeah, stuff does feel kind of aimless.
Well, and I think that's in many ways because the growing identity of multiversality. Tori, where are you? Tori, I need you. Tori, it's a man's world. Tori, where's Tori at? It's a man's world. Sorry, that's James Brown.
Are you actually calling for Tori, or like
kind of? Well, James Brown screams for Teddy. He's looking for Ted Turner.
Okay. And where are we going with this?
I was talking with her earlier today about how one of the things that she is as a reader is a completionist. She's somebody who likes to read every page of everything. But in the aforementioned situation with DC, it's so difficult to be sure what is and isn't canon. Sure, there are issues that are specifically struck from canon, and you can find that kind of information when you look that individual issue up on places like DC Fandom or DC Guide. But if you're trying to imagine what's better to do, read everything and then disregard some information, even though it's one of those things that's like why you say it in court, knowing it's going to be stricken from the record, because the people still heard it. You know, it still influenced other writers, even if you've decided not to run with it. And she asked me if I ever thought that Marvel would do it at this point. And I don't. I think the nature of multiversality is too worth it. The idea that they have then access to any of these characters at any time, I wonder if maybe that's even one of the things we'll see coming out of the end of Krakoa. But, you know, to point to something I did think about Ultimate Black Panther that's just really worth saying is I am melanin deficient to properly have an impactful opinion on Black Panther. You know, Brian Hill as a creator of color, you know, I'm very proud to be a Latinx man. You know, I'm very proud to be a person of, you know, a heritage of color, but I myself am the color of albino milk. And so, you know, I do not understand the struggles of a person of color the way, you know, the cast of Black Panther do. And to know that Brian Hill is writing a book where I am forced to look up references, or to at least do my homework to understand what's trying to be said. It's, you know, it's significant because one of the things I guess I hadn't ever really thought about is, oh, Jeebs, Moon Knight is a white guy, and what continent is Egypt on? I'm like, I'm sure I'm wrong, but I sometimes think Dave Matthews has to be the gentleman from South Africa with the most American top 10 hits and the most Grammys. And I imagine that Charlize Theron has to be the woman with the most Oscar nominations from South Africa. And I think about how, well, that is truly representative of a country. I don't know that it's truly representative of the peoples of a continent, which is made up of many, many countries. And so it's really good to see Ultimate Black Panther be something that I don't get every page of, because it pushes me to be outside of the zone that I often sit comfortably in, that many people cannot.
Was there a specific like reference in there, or like specific series of references that you were not immediately getting?
No, I think for me, one of the things that I struggled with a little bit was the necessary allegory of the parallel situations going on in real world Africa and the necessity of cultures to recognize when they need to advance. One of the things that this book dealt with very directly is gender role perceptions that are baked into the culture itself, where, you know, Okoye is saying, no matter what, you are the king. And basically I've been subjugated. Like, she is very clear to say she does not feel she has the sort of ground that he has. And I feel, as a white person who has enjoyed the benefits of a colonizing nation my whole life, it's not really on me to command African nations to change the way they handle gender politics, even though I am someone who feels it is my place to urge the world to consider the importance of advancing gender politics at large. And so this kind of pushed me to think about my reactions.
That makes sense. I also think it's interesting that it appears that both the Fifths of Khonshu and Ra are both not white here. So that's going to be an interesting... I mean, presumably that will be... that is one of the things that make or changed in this universe where there are no heroes, and could be something that will change in the future.
Well, and I also want to say that one of the other things that I think that's incredible that Maker changed in this universe is, in this universe, Killmonger is going to win the Tony for Best Costume Design.
So that, yes, amazing. And also, do we think that is another person, or is that possibly
Black Panther parading as Killmonger, working against his own interest?
It's not against his own interests. It is against the mandate of his nation that he disagrees with.
His public interests.
But so the first thing that we see, to Nico's point about sort of gender roles here, is that the marriage between Okoye and Black Panther is a marriage of political convenience. They are not intimate. They sleep in separate beds.
It's very Ricky and Lucy. It's not very Fred and Wilma.
No, sir. And which brought up another interesting thing to me, which is
Fred and Wilma?
Yes. In 616 and in the movies, Okoye is a queer woman. And the last time we did Ultimates and an Ultimate Universe, fandom was not nearly as precious about hallmarks of identity for characters. Big ones being like, we didn't super care about queer characters because there were none. It was
and they made Colossus ribbed for our pleasure.
They did make a gay Colossus, but nobody... That was kind of a flip of the situation. They made North Star gay. Like, that was the one. But we had so few, even Mystique back then, it was just kind of like, she's anything. She
could not yet produce semen.
She could not produce semen. But Mystique can just be whatever you want. So, like, there was no particular concern with whether or not she was gay. There were so many character conventions that now I feel like, when we see those characters show up in the MCU, people are like, well, that character better be gay because they're gay. That character better, be black because they're black in the comics. And my immediate thing with seeing Okoye and T'Challa in separate beds was like, okay, marriage of convenience, and also it's probably likely that Okoye is queer in this universe, because I think that's something that fans would really respond poorly to if she wasn't. And it will be an interesting thing if they decide to expand on the Ultimate Universe, whether or not they can change certain characters, particularly minority characters, so wholeheartedly without drawing a bad fan reaction. And will that sort of be one of those things that never allows the universe to take off on its own?
Well, and to that, I think one of the things that I would recommend that they do is, if that is something they might try, don't do it. Bad decision. Unminoritifying a character is never cute. If you think people get ooks about, gaying up a straight dude, you should really see an army of angry homosexuals, especially the ones from the South where they're real into weapons. It's always weird and ugly, and it's a lot of angry Facebook shit posting. I don't want it. Instead, I would recommend they take a look at where the catalog has failed and take a look at opportunities to instead make the catalog thrive. For every time they've tried to produce a character like Alpha, who is a recent creation into Spider-Man, or and now I'm forgetting the name of the character who he fought in Renew Your Vows that then came over to the proper universe, who was the big scary dude. For every guy like that, there's a Black Tarantula who, if this Marvel Contest of Champions fan vote is any indication, he has a strong fan. And Shathra, I swear, dude, that was so, like, that whole vote was just for us. We are such big fans of this game, and if that is any indication that
You guys, it was like okay, so it was Shathra and Black Tarantula, two of our favorite. I mean, Shathra's not really our favorite, but
she is.
We've gotten involved in a lot of Shathra business, so we're very familiar with her. We like her a lot. But then it was Blob, Fred Dukes, who has had such a renaissance lately, Ruby Thursday, who is just weird as shit, and so everybody is interested. I'm forgetting like two, but they were also like Blob was the one where I was like, well, it's definitely going to Blob, and Nico and I are just fighting for Black Tarantula, which is cute, and that's just for me and Nico, and we'll just laugh about it and have fun. And then Blob was in the first round of eliminates, and Black Tarantula has survived this entire time. So I'm like, I got to know the MCOC audience better, because are these like a bunch of like early 90s Tom DeFalco MC2 people, Spider-Verse? If it's wild, very wild situation.
It's a Wild Thing situation.
It's a fantastic character to add to the game. Kabam, call us. Anyway,
Erykah Badu style, call Tyrone, but I'm Tyrone.
Back to my original question, or an early question. Do you think it's possible that Killmonger is T'Challa?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think do you think that that's the idea, or is that just like one of my? Okay. All right.
Okay. Circle gets the square.
Woohoo.
Okay, we gotta finish this.
Yeah, we gotta wrap this one up. So, did you like it?
No, but
Okay.
I like the promise of it, and I like where it's going. Would I say this issue was a D? No way at all. B minus, but like my excitement for future issues is an A. This is one that I think I have a little bit more hope for than Iron Man.
Is that the final book?
Isn't it?
I forget. I got
nothing.
Yeah. I thought this was a very good setup for coming. Honestly, in a lot of ways, I thought this was a better setup for a new version of a character in a new universe that's only had 5 issues of universe building to do it, to start.
Oh, kind of like the New Adventures of Old Christine.
Nailed it. I thought this was more successful in a lot of ways than Ultimate Spider-Man. Do I like the Chiquetto art better? Yes. Do I sort of resonate more like technically because I have lived in New York and like I am married with Peter's struggle? I'm like close to 40. Yeah, but like this was really interesting to me. I thought this hit a lot of really good beats for this is the guy, this is his world, this is the problem, this is the villain. Very clean storytelling. It's more just like, even if you add all that up, I still don't know that I care about the Ultimate Universe. I still don't know that I care about Black Panther in the Ultimate Universe. And I'm not convinced that I should gather up steam for something that if I get 6 issues in and Marvel is like, well, that was a phenomenal 6 issues of these 4 books and we are now dunsies, that I'm just going to be like, you guys do this to me every damn time I get excited about something.
Yeah, it's really annoying when like you get edged by a tease, but it's really annoying when the tease is charging you $4.99 a book. If you're going into a situation and you're like, yeah, edge me, tease me. Okay, cool. Here's my $5. But it's Toto. No, mister, just Toto. So the situation is just very frustrating. That's such an obscure Golden Girls joke. Anyway, let's move on to a book that I thought I was going to hate. Thought I hated when I read it. Decided I liked it a week later. And now I'm kind of cool on it again. but that means I'm going to give Dead X-Men #1 overall a B. And I want to talk about what I don't think was fair to this book before I talk about what I don't think worked for it. This book could have been an event. This book, what Steve Fox packs into, like, this is a long one too. This is a big boy.
She's a dense, extensive title.
This is basically what if Brent Everett was the foundation model for an X-Men title. It's just very dense and way too big. And it's annoying because one of the things that I don't think is fair to this title is that Steve Fox was clearly tasked with coming up with how to complete this puzzle where only one shaped piece is going to fill it in. And yet he was still told the piece has to be somehow visually unique. What he took was a mess of canon smushed into awkward shapes, and he synthesized something much like Fabian Nicieza over on Cable, much more interesting than what's going on around it, which unfortunately makes this a failure for me. You cannot tell me that the best part of this season of Drag Race is Untucked. I'm going to tell you that's a bad season of Drag Race. You cannot tell me that Lost is great if you watch the webisodes and read the secret web messages. Then that's not a great TV show. That's an awesome multimedia project. You cannot tell me this is a good event if the parts that are the most interesting have very little to do with the actual event. And unfortunately, that is something where it's like it's the Jonas Brothers. Nick Jonas and Joe Jonas and even Kevin as a reality star are more interesting than the Jonas Brothers are to me. So I'm never going to give a shit when they reunite. I'd rather they just do new things. And I'd rather see Steve Fox move on to some cool new stuff.
Wow. I could not have put it better myself. It really is that. Like, this is a great book. This is a great idea. And it does fall into... it does have a bunch of information to provide about the fall of the House of X, but it is not... We're going to talk about X-Men in a second, which is the X-Men. It's Sync, Kitty Pryde, Wolverine, Spider-Man's in the mix.
It is the least focused the title X-Men has been since Chris Claremont thought he had designed a revolution.
But they are actively... They keep saying, like, this is the plan against Orcus right now. We are actively doing the thing that needs to happen. We will go rescue Cyclops later. This book is... They're on a really cool multiversal adventure. And then Professor X in data pages and in sort of large expository thought exchanges with Rachel Gray herself, Ascani, who we have missed for too long, is telling you... This is why we have to do this. So technically it is a part of the plan, but the mission being...
So is the plan on Battlestar Galactica.
The mission being this Dead X-Men team's mission being part of the plan that's going to be, the X-Men fighting back against Krakoa almost kind of doesn't matter because it's more interesting that they're in this other universe and we've got Abigail Brand, Armor, Blink, Rootfire, Random, all of whom we haven't seen in forever. They're in their cool sword outfits, which none of us got enough of. We meet, a teenage grown-up son of Cannonball and Smasher, who himself is a Smasher, and we've got Cannonball on this team. So, like, we're seeing all these interesting things pop up, and it's just the whole idea of all of those interesting things is they're not tied to the plan. They're cool stops on the road to being done with the plan.
So I want to just comment on a couple of things about that. You just named so many things that I want to respond to that aren't the actual point of this book, so that there's so much in it. I can't even do it all. And at any point Marvel wants to do this story, I have this whole thing where I think that Sam should marry basically Shea Coulee, who she herself has electric psychic storm powers. but they're psychic. They're not like actual storm. They're just like manifestation. And he meets her at a bar where she is performing a storm on stage. And I just think this would be a great story. Marvel, call me. Anyway, the thing that doesn't work for me about this issue is this cannot possibly be how we address any of this. You know, when Guns N' Roses finally released Chinese Democracy, everybody was forced to go, we fucking look at Buckethead for this, right? One of the reactions here is, this is what the whole fucking Hellfire Gala... Oh, but don't worry, there's a plan for the team. It was this thing that has nothing to do with anything, that is so cool, but has not... The plan had nothing to do with anything? No. When you put a weird bonus game inside of a really cool video game where there's a whole nother game inside of the game, that whole other game that's inside of the game is not the whole point of making the first game.
And it's interesting, you're saying the plan, and we're talking about two plans here. One, we're talking about Marvel's plan, where Marvel really put a bad taste in all of our mouths by doing the Hellfire Gala and killing off this gorgeous, diverse, interesting X-Men team that we were all galvanized by after 2 years of votes where we got...
And it radicalized me.
We got a Scott and Jean team. And like, don't get me wrong, we loved Sync. We loved, there were great moments with, Forge, and we all love Lorna. Like, it's not a bad X-Men team. It's just, we've seen it before. It's really boring. And you told us we were doing these votes, and we're on Krakoa where anything is possible. And, we could have put Scott and Jean anywhere. The X-Men book really could have been something unique and special in this unique and special era. We don't get that 2 years in a row, whatever. We all think Krakoa's lasting 10 years to forever at this point. So none of us are super upset. And we get to the third gala, and finally we get that team that you're talking about. It's Dazzler, it's Prodigy, it's Jubilee. It's these people that we typically think... it's Frenzy. It's people we literally think cannot be X-Men. Not just typically wouldn't be, but cannot be. And 2 panels later, a robot descends from orbit and violently and gorily kills them all. And smugly, Jerry Duggan and a bunch of the editors all say, like, well, you guys just don't like story conflict. You don't know what we're going to do with them. There's a plan in place. And, I didn't bite at the time because I was so annoyed. But to me, to be that smug is... when From the Ashes starts, this is the team, or like, this is the promised team for 2 years or something. Not they're getting a 4-issue mini that is kind of the tail end of Krakoa, slotted in the side universe. They who knows what's going to happen with them. But then on top of that, that's Marvel's plan in our world that we're living in. In their world, Professor X has this weird plan that involves Rasputin, and he have been collaborating the whole time. Iskani, who we haven't seen since the last Captain Britain book. I guess she was in a couple of Infinity issues. But it's on top of the fact that, like, we're not really privy to this plan. Like, I'm sure, okay, it's happening, but, like, I'm not on board. I haven't been following Professor X on this journey. But also, is the point of Krakoa, or is it not, that Professor X is just this gigantic fuck up? You guys can't have it both ways. You can't give us Sins of Sinister, which is Professor X completely fumbled the bag of Krakoa by inviting Sinister in, and can't be trusted because he's such a hubristic idiot piece of shit. He lost his 2 best friends. The only person that, like, could make the machinery work is completely evil, fucked everybody over. But now you're saying, follow him one more time. He's got one more plan. Go with this one. This is a good plan. I know all the other plans were bad, and we told you that, and we said, like, definitively he's the worst. Follow this one more plan because he's Professor X, because you gotta. This is the type of stuff where I'm just like, there's no cohesive direction. There are different creators who think Professor X is a genius, who think he's an asshole. There's editors who think the same thing. And there's no, like, we're all sitting at a table. Can we agree we're going to tell stories that highlight Professor X is not the man to follow? And that means he doesn't get the final plan when the whole thing is about to run down. No, we can't have that.
Well, that's why I think he's going to be the traitor. you know, I know we're told who Dominion is, but like, has anybody like looked at Dominion in the face and been like, "Hi, you are Dominion, and I see your soul."
I mean, I love that, but I think you are having too good of an idea. I think my point is like, yeah, that would make sense in a world where everybody was firing on the correct cylinders, but I keep seeing that not happen. So I think you're wrong, not because it's a bad idea, but because it is too good of an idea. And I just see good ideas passing us by constantly while we do these things. I hope you're right. I just don't think it's likely.
Well, you know, until we get a little bit more about how this title is about like using Moira engines
Weapon
to
M.
defeat the Orcus machine and get all the information that Xavier might need to defeat Dominion. Maybe, sort of. It's a messy book, but the thing that it did that I loved was this in contrast, Prodigy here in contrast to Sinkin X-Men. This is a night and day situation. This title, like I said, its failures have nothing to do with how cool this book is. All of the failures of X-Men 31 are the book is. So, you know, there's this thing that I say a lot that is like Chris Claremont and Neil Gaiman invented the rock star run, you know, but same thing with Wolfman and Perez over on Teen Titans. Let's not sell short, you know, Kings at the height of their power, and Nascenti and John Romita Jr. over on Daredevil. They invented this thing where it was so cool to be like the cool guy on a book, you know, that like in some ways, I think Jerry Duggan was convinced to keep going bigger and bigger by an editorial machine that believed they could bring this across the finish line. But then the reality of the fiduciary responsibility to shareholders eventually set in, and these best intentions did not get to fulfill their obligations. So now you have a guy who was told to plan for 30 years of success, who is trying to pack it all into 3 months of finishing things up. And it's about as effective as a toddler trying to write a novel.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, I tend to even overlook all of the like granular perspective that you're providing that isn't incorrect, because I'm just still stuck on like, this shouldn't even be happening. Like, it doesn't even matter if he's writing issue 31 of X-Men that is, you know, 2/3 of the way or maybe like 2/5 of the way through the Fall of the House of X. Fall of the House of X is a bad idea. So it doesn't matter if a good writer or a bad writer is writing it. This isn't good. We shouldn't be doing this. And if we're doing it, we should be doing it like this. And then, you know, I get to moments like Kamala and Spider-Man working on getting this thing around, and Kamala says, I know the High Evolutionary designed this sphere to turn us all sterile or to make us lizards, but imagine the good we're doing with it. Fine. Spider-Man says, you don't have to tell me twice. Definitely easier than trying to get your insurance company to approve treatment. This is fun and easy. The worst Spider-Man writing dialogue I have seen, and I have read a lot of the MC2 universe. Why was that line left in? Why was nobody called to punch that up? That's like, it's like the Che Diaz jokes in And Just Like That. There's not a single funny joke that this incredibly successful stand-up comedian ostensibly tells in this entire show. If you can't write a funny Spider-Man joke, you establish early on that he is depressed for some reason, and then he just doesn't make jokes.
You know when you get humorously stabbed, like it's a scary movie, and then you have to go to work the next day,
Yeah,
so you
all the
eat your
time.
body weight in Percodan. I feel like even that Spider-Man would not deliver the dialogue that he delivers here, and that's, again, I think what's happening is Jerry Duggan was told to write a very big story and did not get the room to land the plane. Don't give the pilot the plane. Tell the pilot he must fly the plane. Threaten the pilot to take away his plane license. And then, because it's not a pilot's license, no one's saying he can't be a writer. They're saying he can't right for a big commercial company like Marvel. And then, not give him the room to land this thing, because I feel like the speed that Kitty has been on has the metaphor
I
gotten
keep
too big?
reading, I keep scanning to other things that Spider-Man says, and there's not a single good Spider-Man line in the entire book. I'll live. Thanks for taking me straight home. Any chance you could teleport us somewhere safer, like Mordor? I think that's actually the best one. It's like marginally kind of funny.
It reminds me of when people would try too hard to write the Scooby Gang, which was literally 25 years ago.
Yes.
So the fact that they're making Peter Parker sound like that today.
Yeah. 100%.
It sounds like the kind of dialogue that Chad White would come up with on the spot.
Okay, enough porn star references. You're cut off for the rest of the episode. Whole rest of the episode.
Way to coach it out,
Kevin. He doesn't make pop culture references, so you're cut off.
No, I was referring to conversations that feel like they should be appropriate, but when you start to examine the dialogue, they don't work. The thing about that reference isn't that Spider-Man wouldn't make a Lord of the Rings reference. It's that Spider-Man wouldn't say somewhere safer like Mordor, because that feels a little bit more like a Chandler Bing joke. And one of the things that what we're talking about here, instead of cutting me off, ask me to explain with annotations. One of the things that we're talking about here is that when Bendis did a redesign of the Marvel Universe at large at the point that he created the New Avengers, we saw a reinterpretation of nearly every character as to some extent wisecracking. It's a necessary element of balancing out these stories that no matter how dark they get, there needs to be the hammer is my penis moment for Thor, because it elevates the book to a place of humanity. It's not that people are always funny in moments of crisis, but how many of us have recently lost a loved one and we're in the car on the way home and somebody says something funny and everybody bursts out laughing. And, that's the humanity that, Spider-Man should be infusing.
And that was a big, generational change. As millennials got older and became the primary comic book reading audience, we are a say shit, just talk shit bunch. And Gen X too. Even if we're not making the funniest jokes in our worst moments, I think a lot of us in times of stress, all the time, if I'm having a bad day, I'll be like, I'm thinking about killing myself, but everything's cool. And you just say dumb shit. You say jokey stuff. And it's not that they all have to land, but you're absolutely right. It was a big change that every character really started to talk more like how we would expect somebody to talk in a crisis situation, even if we're like, well, I don't know what fighting aliens is the crisis, but I still think I would probably make stupid jokes.
For sure. For me, the other part that did not work about this issue was the, I guess, speed at which we were dealing with all of this. It felt like in many ways we were being compelled to accept that this universe would go at whatever speed that they feel it can go in each issue. Part of the problem there is it feels like sometimes an issue of Immortal X-Men will span 4 months, and sometimes an issue of X-Men will span 4 hours. And I understand that each book has unique pacing, and no book is beholden to each other's pacing at a grand scale. But part of what's happened is I've real time lost a sense of how long this event has been going on. It kind of feels like they touted the next Hellfire Gala coming starting in January of 2023. So in some ways, I feel like I'm still on the story that started in January 2023. And in no way does this feel like I am still on the story that started when Krakoa began, that this is supposed to be the finale to. So I do think we are reaching a point of diminishing returns on the constant sliding compression of time in some of this event. It's making it tough.
I also feel like this moment, curing everybody of the backdoor in Krakoan medicine, that's so huge. The idea that it is, Sync, Kitty Pryde, Nightcrawler, kind of Talon, Wolverine, and Spider-Man, all in the shadow. Not even Emma and Iron Man are there. This is a tech thing. They've got this janky little, copy machine computer on the rooftop, and then just Nimrod shows up. And I don't know that I ever get a clear explanation for why it's so covert for both sides. Like, this would have been a really great place, especially because we've done a bunch of issues now of super covert underground, we're gross sewer people, X-Men, that, like, to have this one be the one where Magic, who is around, she's showing up next issue, for Magic to show up here and be like, I'll fuck you up too. For so many of the people, we now know Rachel is around. And for Nimrod to bring some crew too. Like, this is a big thing. Now, if nothing else, no matter what else happens, no humans are at risk. That's huge. That is 1/3 of the problem dealt with. And it's just a little bit like under the radar for everybody, unremarkable. We're dealing with this Sync thing that the impact of that should feel
Huge.
way bigger.
Yeah.
If we're acting like this moment of plotting isn't huge, and the Sync moment also doesn't land, and then in the midst of all of that, very important stuff happening, we take a 5-page break. That comes complete, a 4-page break that comes completely out of nowhere, to smash cut over to the Hellfire Club, where Mary, who has been in books for 2 months after returning from Realm of X, shows up to reunite with Wilson for the first time. Even though,
is it the first time?
Even though, they have been together the first time. And I think this is sloppy. I think this is especially sloppy because these 4 pages literally could have been pulled from this script and put anywhere else. Wilson has been in the Hellfire Club in Iron Man. He's been in the Hellfire Club in Spider-Man.
Sing it.
It's been everywhere. So it's not like you can only show Wilson in the Hellfire Club in X-Men. And then it is a kind of a huge thing if you're a Wilson and Mary fan. And it's a big part of Devil's Reign. Devil's Reign. God, what's this? Oh, Gang War. It's a big part of Gang War that their involvement is partially because Wilson is concerned about one of his children. He's concerned about both of them, but they go kind of nuts and behave very erratically. And it's because Mary essentially cheated on Wilson in Realm of X. And it gets brought up in this really weird way in the books that now actually makes perfect sense because Mary returns to Wilson and essentially confesses. There's this really clear timeline that ought to have happened. But this book is 2 to 3 months too late. And it just feels really sloppy. It's another one of those things that just makes things feel kind of aimless. This is, we were talking a few weeks ago, and I was just talking about this idea that, like, at one point Marvel created a whole other Mastermind sister because they were like, no, there's already a Mastermind in a book. You can't say she was in another location at one time, in another book at the same time. You actually absolutely can, because as we've seen, all books are on sliding timescales. You absolutely can just have said, like, oh, that one was last week and she was in, Australia last week and then she came back to America and that's why she's here now. That was a thing, that they were so fastidious about continuity that no, you create a whole new character because they can't have been in 2 places at the same time. And now they can't figure out how to properly get Mary home and introduce a storyline and then continue that one it just left such a bad taste in my mouth. And as like the world's biggest Wilson and Mary fan, who has really loved seeing the uniqueness and the evolution of their relationship, to get this one botched was just like, man, it made me annoyed as hell.
I really cannot help but agree that this is why I think, you know, I'm not reading more DC than I'm reading Marvel or anything. I'm just reading a lot of DC right now to do this Green Lantern read. Part of why it's actually a relief that, and yes, it was such as always, Tasty Cake. We love having you here. Thanks for playing with us all night. Can't wait to see you again. You know, one of the things that, as always, I think when I'm looking at this run and I'm trying to find how to get into Green Lantern, and I'm seeing that, like, oh shit, other than Hal appearing in Justice League, there's not a lot of appearances actually over the years. In fact, I came to find that there's only one appearance of John Stewart I needed to read that is not Green Lantern in his first 10 years. It's really interesting the ways in which it turns out, you know, the simplicity of a streamlined set of appearances make things. Now, sometimes that does lead to a benefit for editorial. So if anything, I think it's so cool that Mary and Wilson are kind of Daredevil characters, but they're kind of Spider-Man characters in all the ways that matter. And now they're kind of X-Men characters in all the ways that matter. But then what book gets to show their fucking cool moments? Because it's not like you're running around giving them Wilson and Mary. Although, seriously, a book called Mary Wilson, as far as I'm concerned, should just be called The Supremes. So the thing here is sort of like, this is a great place for Mary and Wilson, but it really can't be their home book. So people are all sort of fighting over who gets to show the moment, and it's just not translating.
I mean, and it can't be their home book because this isn't a book that's going to last.
It's not going the distance.
I mean, it's literally ending. Like we're closing up it from the ashes, and I don't feel like what we're setting up here is longevity for them in the X universe or in the X corner of the universe. I feel like everybody is going to want to, especially now that we're doing Born Again, everybody's going to want to see Wilson back in, you know, Daredevil focus. And it's just unfortunate because they are actually really thriving here. Hellfire Club is dull as it was. It's stupid with Sebastian Shaw. It's kind of funny, like when they're stupid little dandy men, it can be funny at times. But like Wilson, this absolute shark who, despite not being powered, I think sometimes Sebastian Shaw does stuff and you're like, for a guy who's like ostensibly just pure capitalist evil, he really is just too froofy. Wilson just often feels like he would get Sebastian Shaw immediately killed because this is too much nonsense. Wilson feels...
You know what? Thank you. Sorry, can I just for a minute... the thing that they need to do is at this moment now, from now on, the Hellfire Club is the biggest, baddest rollers of the Marvel Universe.
I agree.
And so always, Tony Stark is in there.
Yeah.
Period. No choice. Kingpin, always. And then, you know, depending on who you do. But to your point, one of the things I've always felt when people are like, oh my God, Apocalypse is the best. No. Do you know why Apocalypse isn't the best? Because Apocalypse is always like, I'm going to let you survive so I can monologue. That's not cool. Do you know what Kingpin does? Kingpin comes over and says, I'm going to smash your face with a car door until you can no longer embarrass me in front of Vanessa. And like, there is no bullshit to the Kingpin. I understand that not everybody who is an X fan is going to feel this way. But if you want my opinion, Kingpin legitimizes Emma Frost's Hellfire Club way more than Sebastian Shaw does.
I completely agree with that. I mean, to the Apocalypse point, what made the Krakoan era so great with Apocalypse is the idea that there was more going on this whole time. He doesn't work as a really evil or even heartless guy. He works as a guy who has set everything aside and can be very cruel because he has a plan, because he's been trying to work mutant magic, because he's been trying to get his wife back, because he's been trying to save mutant kind. And sometimes he nurtures things in weird ways. But there are a lot of times where if Apocalypse is as survival as the fittest as he's supposed to be, okay, then kill those people immediately. Why are we faffing around? And it's fine that he's not that way. I like him better not that way. But then he's a different type of guy than Kingpin.
Yes.
Who is just very goal focused. And silly dandy villains who play with their food. Selene, very fun, because then she tries to ascend to godhood. So like it kind of works. Leland and Shaw are two people. It just no longer works for it. Cute in the 80s. I get it. Really fun. Great way to start, rethinking how we do villains. This has gone on too long. It's annoying. They always have stupid plans. If they are these cutthroat capitalists, money is everything. Nothing will stand in their way. Way more people should be dead. And the fact that they're not, it's boring. Get them out. Put them somewhere else. They could have great stories other places. But yeah, Hellfire Club should now be where it's sort of the intersection of power brokerage for people that have places in many parts of the Marvel universe. Iron Man, great example, especially now because he's married to Emma, because he has a lot of ties to the mutants. Spider-Man doesn't have money, but like there are ways in which Spider-Man as like maybe a proxy for like Logan's fortune would be involved there, because he's like taught at the school. I don't know. I particularly what you said, that Wilson's Hellfire Club makes so much more sense for Emma's whole existence, including the Devil's Reign fact that Emma ran jobs for Wilson.
Best thing that, I mean, like, look, my perfect intersection of the whole Marvel universe is Daredevil and X-Men. One of the greatest gifts that you ever gave me. Like, I mean, really, like, one of the greatest gifts you've ever given me is being a Daredevil fan, like the way you are. And like, you couldn't have chosen to be, you just are. And that Miller Daredevil really is as good as Dark Phoenix Saga and all of the best of Claremont that we're going to get to in a minute. But like, when you think about the sort of magic that you get to from characters like this, they really do stand the test of time. With characters like Emma, with characters like Jean. I don't put Kingpin on the level with Magneto lightly. And I just feel like people sometimes think because like I said, the separation makes it easier for editorial. But that doesn't mean the places that there are cool crossover are bad. One of my favorite things is that, it's a little bit Peter Parker, it's a little bit Ben Reilly, but X-Man, Nate Gray, has so many cool experiences with Spider-Man. And now we know that Cable has a super cool place in Hell's Kitchen. And that's with like Daredevil. And it just sort of adds to that picture. Nate Gray was drawn to Spider-Man. Cable's drawn to the same place as Daredevil. Those sorts of magic parallels do support this universe in a way that just expands on its quality. And so I don't know. I think if we open our hearts a little bit more to things like Wilson and Mary being in the X-Men, it would allow for things like this to happen more organically.
Yep. I think you totally nailed it. And I think, man, we can still do it. I think we're spitting better ideas than are being sent out. And, not that we're like geniuses or anything. I'm not saying that the creatives are not having these ideas at Marvel, but these are not these ideas that are getting published.
Instead what's getting published is turning back the clock to...
Now, hold on before we go too hard on turning back the clock. All I will say is I was very skeptical about this book, and I could continue to be, but... we got a foundational part of the resurrection of Magneto being tied to a Claremont retro book out of nowhere a couple weeks ago. And so I went into Wolverine Madripoor Knights with a much more open mind than I would have had Resurrection of Magneto not already come out. Maybe it's just Al Ewing. Maybe editorial is like, let's throw our old guy Chris a bone. But like now I'm looking all around for the references and like where are the spots where somebody could come around in a few months to a year or whatever and be like, that thing that happened in Madripoor Knights, still super relevant.
So, and I'm going to use me. You know, when you think something you came up with is so good and nobody else does, and so everybody just sort of looks at you and they're like, like, you know, before the show, Kevin was like, what do we want to listen to? And I went to go say a song and TK gave a suggestion and I was like, oh, okay, we'll go in that direction. And my suggestion wasn't outside of what TK would have wanted. It just wasn't in the vein of what he was suggesting right now. But there are songs that sometimes I'll be like, ooh, what about this one? And everyone will be like, well, what about this one instead? And there is a group of characters that Chris Claremont is convinced would have been the Brood, would have been the New Mutants. Chris Claremont cannot be convinced that the Bacchae are not the greatest thing he's ever come up with. And everything he's done retroactively fit into canon, it seems, in the last couple of years have featured them. Like sometimes they show up and nearly kill the Fantastic Four. And sometimes they show up and like quite literally like lick Wolverine on the face. I just don't know what he's doing.
Well, it's so wild too because you know, I am thinking about, I was just re-listening to the Sandman audio drama, which, you know, the Sandman also has the Bacchae in their original forms, ripping apart Orpheus. And it just sort of, I don't know, like it feels like Chris Claremont was having a love affair of ideas at the same time as Neil Gaiman, and just went in a really different direction with it.
You know, he went in a... Yeah, so here's the thing. Like, nobody ever says to Third Eye Blind, wow, this new album sounds like you're using modern technology to make 90s music. People just go like, wow, it's another album that sounds like Third Eye Blind. I don't know. Are Third Eye Blind still, do they have a fourth blind eye yet? I don't know. But they just as a band. When an artist gets older, if they're not an artist who defines themselves by their ability to change genres, whether to a new popular genre like Madonna, for the better or for worse, or like Tori Amos, sometimes to like 70s classic rock in the mid-aughts out of nowhere, when you're an artist who defines yourself by your original sound, people sometimes look at you and they forgive the sort of like disconnect between what modern things are and what you do. Chris Claremont, it seems, cannot step outside of his glory era anymore. And it's not that he didn't have a number of amazing eras after the fact, but Wolverine Madripoor Knights is really a strong, striking example of a guy who is struggling to leave behind his glory days. And don't get me wrong, he's not saying like, you know, Giant Size X-Men #1. He's saying something like, you know, the height of his powers, but this is tough.
Do you think that he goes in and is like, I want to do Wolverine Madripoor Knights? Or is he like, I'm ready to work, and they're like, the only thing you can do is Wolverine Madripoor Knights? The only thing you can do is a retro book that we're allowed to pull from, but you cannot use to try and affect continuity.
I think part of what's going on there is, yeah, they are trying to keep him at a distance. They're trying to keep him a little bit, I don't want to say neutered exactly, but they really are trying to get Wolverine and like sort of like Wolverine and Madripoor Knights, titles like that, into a place where Claremont can continue to uh, thrive as a creator without having to worry about how outdated he sounds, because the only person he's being compared to is himself effectively. So I think that is the sort of like the hallmark of the project here.
And I guess the question becomes like, does this make any sense? Like, who is this for? Is this good for anybody? I don't know. I thought this was a perfectly fine thing to exist. I'm not like, for one thing, we didn't ever need to revisit Asian Betsy. I know that every once in a while it's going to need to come up. I think we should probably save those appearances for when they are 100% necessary for some reason or another. When you absolutely need the flashback for a retcon, whatever. Bringing Asian Betsy into the mix was weird. But I don't know. The other thing I was thinking is like, this is Cap, Natasha, and Wolverine. Like, is this in any way, and Madripoor, like, 4 things that could eventually become important for the MCU in combination?
Hold on. Okay. Side note.
What?
Stop everything.
Stop
If
it.
tomorrow they said, "Hey, Nico, you're in charge of the MCU.
Yes.
What do you want to do? What is your origin story?" No,
What
it's
do you wanna
Uncanny
do?
X-Men 268. If
Okay.
somebody asked me what I think is like the perfect story for like, cross-pollination of inter-universe ideas, it's Uncanny X-Men 268. Do I think every page is perfect? No. Do I think the issue did some landmark things? Yeah. And then what's tough is when you think about 268 and where it falls in the greater picture of the Claremont era, it's not just toward the end, it's in its final year. 268 is so close to 278 when he would leave the title. And then ultimately he would have 3 more issues before he departs the series. So I'm struck by how much I would base an entire universe around Madripoor Knights. And this is something I am, if we can indulge me a second, right? When they decided to New 52, which we mentioned a little bit earlier, when they decided to New 52 over at DC, one of the things they said is, hey, we recognize that at this point, the only Vertigo title still going, that is a Vertigo DC Universe adjacent title, is the longest running uninterrupted title at DC now, which is Hellblazer, which at the time was at like 280 something. But please don't worry. John is only going to be a regular in Justice League Dark in the New 52, and that will be written by Pete Milligan, who is going to remain on Hellblazer for the foreseeable future. When I say they said this, I mean I literally had Karen Berger in a room and I asked her. So, like, legitimately, from like the goddess of comics herself, from like the Stevie Nicks of comics, Karen Berger, that was the plan. They very quickly decided that wasn't going to work. They end Hellblazer with 300 and what is my favorite run of Hellblazer ever, 250 to 300. What a great way to go out. But I bring this up because the nature of what was going on was that allowed them to publish 2 versions of the same thing at once. You could get John Constantine in the pages of New 52, where he was sort of like super wet for Zatanna. No idea what was going on there. But then there was also Hellblazer, where he was married to Epiphany Greaves, like the greatest character in the history of the Hellblazer franchise. And next to Kit, God bless, I would never ever say anything bad about Kit. So sorry, she'd punch me in the face. And this is something I think Marvel needs to consider. I think it might be time to consider Marvel Madripoor Knights. a sub imprint that follows the Chris Claremont universe, and guys like Chris Claremont and Tom DeFalco can just figure out how to fit in the same fucking sandbox. And somehow there's an event that brings X-Men from 92 over to MC2 from its start just 5 years later. And you just put these giants of ability in the same sandbox, not because all giants of ability are the same and all old men are the same. No. Because there's only so much you can ask your audience to purchase. And there's proof that shared universe titles do a little bit better at corporate levels. So I don't know. This is tough because this is an A+ from me, but I don't think this is worth $5. It's worth $2,000 to me, like the cover of Uncanny 138. I one time said to Chris Claremont, it says 25 cents on the cover, and that it could be worth $2,000 because it was like a contest that was on the cover. And I was like, but it's worth $1 million to me. It's priceless. And he signed it, and he like was really sweet to me. And he's a very nice man if you stroke his ego, evidently. But I don't know. This is a knockout for me. This is my favorite. I own this issue, and I one time did a photo showing it. I own this issue at 6 sizes.
268.
268, yeah.
268
is like my favorite single issue of Uncanny X-Men ever. And this is king shit. But it does not have a place on shelves unless you give it a place on shelves. So that's my final thought.
All right. I feel you. Yeah, I mean, I don't have any expectations that we're actually going to get all of the old timers that, still have a lot of creativity in them into an imprint or into a universe. I mean, we've done it with Legends. We've done it with Forevers.
Well, no, that's the problem. They were not to correct. I'm so sorry. I did not mean that as sharp as it came out, but no, that is what Marvel told us. But what all of those stories were stories that fit in our continuity.
Yeah.
No, they need a separate continuity where they don't have to worry about eventually becoming Krakoa.
I do agree with that, but I just feel like the siloing scares Marvel too much. And, like everything else, they don't market. So how are they ever, they're not going to take the risk on something they themselves know they're not going to put anything up for.
And, part of that for me has to do with the nature of corporate comics as a reactionary fear system instead of as a system that can rely on bravery, because the audiences will always come back. There's so much more that was possible before Marvel was worried about being a $1 trillion corporation. And I think for me, I don't know. I have a frustration when it comes to things like Madripoor Knights just not being their own universe. Do I think Chris Claremont is a perfect writer? No. But do I think guys like Chris Claremont, Louise Simonson, and Nesenti, the people who dominated these classic stories from the 80s, deserve a chance to keep talking? Yes. Do I think Frank Miller does? Well, it depends on the day of the week. And there's something else I do want to say. There was a period of time where Howard Chaykin, who was a hero to me throughout the 80s and 90s, and then eventually, and today. But Howard Chaykin for a while was pretty accurately accused of some really horrifyingly transphobic comments. And he was somehow uncanceled and is now working actively with non-binary creators and with non-binary characters in thoughtful ways. And I don't know when something like that got okay not to celebrate. I'm not saying applaud people for doing the bare minimum, but I felt stolen from when Howard Chaykin ripped himself from my childhood. And that a guy like that could reinsert himself to my childhood by being sorry and fixing things. That's one of a kind. And, I would just love to see him come back to characters like Wolverine. Anybody who's not familiar with Chaykin, he did Avengers 1959. He did the 3rd volume of Supreme Power. He did a bunch of Wolverine. Chaykin is his pencils are just big, beefy guys where you can always smell the ball sweat. So it's one of a kind.
And let's not forget his podcast, You Chakin' Me Crazy.
No, I believe his podcast is called Shake and Bake. So anyway, thanks for indulging me on a book that is probably going to be forgotten to the annals of time until Marvel decides to throw it in a Chris Claremont Wolverine omnibus that you never knew you needed.
Yeah, anytime.
Oh, wait. Are we talking briefly about omnibus editions that Marvel is trying to convince us we never knew we needed?
Who?
I don't know if it's ever happened before that Marvel's released 3 different omnibus editions on the same day, where 3 different omnibus editions each represent a different facet of the publishing. But I'm surprised, honestly. There was a period of time where things like omnibus collecting were designed to be boutique, highly expensive collector things. And now what we're seeing is a reinterpretation of what collecting $125 books means. I recently was looking into the price of a classic omnibus. And when omnibus editions came out, they would vary in price. The really small boys would be like 40, but the big boys would be like 100. And now we're seeing things span a little bit more from 75 to 150. There's a particular, what I would call supplantive omnibus edition that when it was initially released was $75 and now it's 100. No additional material added, just sort of like cost of living increase on this book. And I don't want to say I'm shaken to my core, but there are certain things that we consider Marvel Bibles. Like there are certain hardcovers upon which everything in the Marvel universe rests. And they are, for the most part, collected in these omnibus edition tomes. And so when we find ourselves in a position where they are kind of like changing the rules and they're redetermining prices, I'm a little surprised. This week alone, we saw the release of the February 1964 complete month Marvel Omnibus. We saw the Spider-Man Ben Reilly Volume 2 new printing. And we saw the Ohatmu Master Edition, which is the set from 93-94. Those of you who psychotically collect Ohatmus, this is a beyond a dream come true. This is like unimaginable. I really thought the Ohatmu omnibus edition line was done, which is why I did not choose to collect them. But if I had known they were going to go this far, I would have salivated at the chance. But now most of those are way too expensive to grab. I'm going to be sure to grab that DM variant of 1964 that is essentially the cover to Daredevil #1, because that thing is beautiful. What a great cleanup repurpose of Daredevil #1. Anyway, why I'm bringing all of this up is once upon a time, omnibus editions were saved for things that could no longer be purchased in any form, such as Earth X or Alias. These were omnibus editions that were meant to reflect the specialness of titles. Also, things like the first, I think it's 37 issues of Fantastic Four are collected in that first omnibus. Uncanny X-Men got one early on. Omnibus editions were designed to be expensive collector's items. Now there's at least 5 consecutive lines. We have the by era line, which includes things like the individual months, which I'm going to ask you guys about that in a minute, which what the fuck? I don't even know. But there's also cool eras like Spider-Man Brand New Day. But X-Men Decimation is getting an era collection. That's awesome. That is so awesome. That is not a period of time where any book was great. That is a period of time where being an X-Men fan was great, and reading that omnibus will be a cool way to simulate it. Also, I love old men who have a lot of wisdom and also gray chest hair. And so I will be buying the shit out of that Death of Wolverine omnibus they announced. It has Wolverine Volume 5 and Volume 6 in their entirety. That's both Stegman runs. Are you kidding me? Holy shit. That's the Paul Cornell era. Not a great era, but a lot of cool art. There's some Alan Davis before he didn't really do new stuff anymore. And then there's the Complete Death of Wolverine by McNiven and Sewell, plus the first 17 issues of Wolverines, which leads me to believe there's going to be a follow-up series, which will be the Resurrection of Wolverine. That'll be exciting. I'll buy both. Believe my money. He's such a wonderful character. We have the by character things like Ben Reilly. That's just every issue of fucking Ben Reilly in order. What? There are characters you simply can't do that for, but for characters like Dazzler, who's getting an exciting, not just her own series, which is 43 proper issues, but a complete Dazzler overview, like 60-something issues. Get it, mama. Yeah, I like that night. We have by title, like Ohatmu, plus Moon Knight by McKay is getting one. And if you're a cross-gen boy, hey, what's up? Mystic is getting one, and it's the complete Mystic, which if you're a cross-gen boy, this is very exciting. This is so cool. This is obscene. And it even has like the fucking cross-gen one-shot that it's too cool. It has the 4 issues by Mark Waid from the revival. Shut up. Oh no, Mark Waid did the Sigil revival, I think. No, Mark Waid did Mystic, I think. We'll look it up. Really exciting. There's also by storyline, the recently released Devil's Reign omnibus on its way to me, as well as the recently released Judgment Day, not on its way to me. Spider-Man: The Complete Black Costume Saga, not a run, but an more than an era, a storyline. And then I thought that the by creator line was dead, done, bye-bye. But it turns out they had one more in them. And in December, they released the Marvel Universe by Wackadoo Art Adams. He is a guy that if you listen to his podcast appearances, I'm pretty sure the kindest way to describe him is Wackadoo Art Adams. So do not do that. Do not listen and continue to love his art. But I am very excited to talk about a lot of this. Now, TK, my first question. This is the 4th by the month book. There is, I think it's like June 61. It's like July 62. There's 4 of them. And then there's a couple of others. The 90s, number ones. Marvel Point One Now, right? How do you feel about these books that have literally no complete stories, no anything? You can't read them.
Yeah, I'm not interested at all. I don't know who they're for. I mean, I guess I can see a form of collector.
No.
Where it's both like shelf appeal,
Yeah,
and then also like you pull it out and point for somebody. But no, for me, it is just absolutely a no.
It's a no for me, dog.
It's a no for me, dog. My Omnis are for runs. Even something like Decimation, I think, is a really interesting idea. Unfortunately, I don't trust Marvel to curate. That would need to be 2 or 3 Omnis, I think, really.
Wait, no. Dude, have you looked at it? Dude, it is the coolest looking Omni of all time. Hold on, wait. I have to read this to you. It's worth it. I'm not trying to be that guy on air. It's that good. I am quite literally impressed, and I am rarely impressed. The decision was that this was not just going to be a sequel to the House of M omnibus. It is going to stand on its own as an X-Men Decimation omnibus, starting with the reprintings, according to this, in total of House of M number 8, Mutopia X number 5, Decimation, House of M the day after, and then goes on to print X-Men 177 to 179, so the whole Sentinel Squad 1 arc by Pete Milligan. New X-Men 20 to 24, which is the arc that Kyle and Yosta do that introduces Laura to the team. X Factor 1 through 4, better known as the X Factor Investigations introduction. Generation M, which had those bitchin' covers. Son of M 1 through 6, again, bitchin' covers. That was one of those David Hine miniseries that just didn't get love at the time, and I still don't think really gets the respect it deserves. Sentinel Squad 1 through 5, the 198 1 through 5, the entire goddamn New Avengers arc about the guy who gets all the powers from everybody, X-Men Unlimited 13, and the entire 198 files. This is as complete a job as you can do. This really is one of the best designed omnibus editions in like the history of collecting this stuff.
Okay. Credit where credit's due, for sure.
Yeah, I was shocked because they left stuff out. No New Excalibur. Why? Because New Excalibur has nothing to do with this. No Uncanny X-Men. Why? Because the Uncanny X-Men stuff had nothing to do with this. That stuff going to get its own edition at some point, and it's going to be awesome, but it wouldn't make sense here. Now, how do you feel about creator omnibuy? Claremont's got some, Davis has got some, Liefeld's got one.
Davis is high up on a list where I would be interested, because there are some artists that I've always resonated with that I would love to see. Art Adams probably is not on that list, but I think he is a titan. It's just like it's a resonance thing for me. It hasn't quite been there. And saying I don't want the Art Adams one and saying one that I'm going to suggest, everybody's going to be like, you are a garbage person. But like immediately, because I can't think of a time it's been collected and it resonated at the time, there's some nostalgia value. I'd take a Joe Mad Omni.
Listen, I worked at a comic shop the day Joe Mad announced that he was doing that third printing cover of House of M #1. We had like 17 men come in and be like, I don't care if that cover's $50. I would like to have at least 2 copies of that cover immediately put into my long box. Thank you.
Yep.
Joe Mad.
That was me. I was one of them.
So was I, and I worked there. Joe Mad, you can do no wrong. But can I say somebody I was kind of surprised you didn't say?
What?
I don't want to blow you up the way, but like, you got a special day coming up soon. And I wanted nothing more than to be able to get you a Generation X omnibus because Chris Bacalo's art.
Yeah, Bacalo, yes. Bacalo would absolutely. But like that's a really good example. Bacalo, I want a Generation X omnibus first. And then I would absolutely take a Bacalo.
One sec. I just want to to interact with this question that is coming to us from a super amazing YouTube account. Big fan. I avoid omnis, but your enthusiasm makes me want to reconsider. If you have a run you love, if there is a particular period of Marvel that you like that you want to like mention, I'll find out if there's an omni for you and I'll let you know if it's one of the better reviewed ones, because there is very little as like kind of fulfilling as going over to your shelf and pulling that tome of these stories you love off and just getting to hold it. It makes a story feel very real and very personal. And I think that is worth it. It's $100. It's not a cheap experience, but it's $100 well spent, considering I've had nights of drinking that cost $100 that I don't remember. Spending $100 on a book that I get to cherish over and over and over and over and over really says a lot about books.
I get that.
Now, my last one for you, TK, that I'm super curious to know how you feel about. with things like Decimation, it brings me to the fact that Uncanny X-Men is going to cease publication of its omnibus editions with number 5, at least in a way that is meaningful, as all subsequent required issues will be collected in crossover volumes. Things like the Prelude to the Mutant Massacre, Prelude to the Fall of the Mutants, etc., really give us the opportunity to collect whole swaths of the Marvel Universe en masse. But it means that Uncanny X-Men is going to lose that presentation. Do you feel that you lose something by losing that unique presentation of titles? Or do you just want the fucking shit and shut up and be happy because this is like 40-year-old comics now? You know, I'm going to assume that this is full of horrible burns.
I don't know where I stand right now. I think it's closer to the latter, but because Omnis feel like they are in such a weird place where they're getting more expensive, they are at times, it seems like more of the time they're giving us so much less. But then you describe something like the Decimation Omni to me and I'm like, okay, that's a solid boy, but then that's definitely $125. And you know, I've got 2 Phoenix Omnis that are like not my fave. That, you know, just they were expensive, but they didn't really give me much. So at this point, it's just kind of like I don't really even know what to expect or what to demand. I just kind of want to move into a new phase where things feel a little bit like I can bank on them for a while.
You know, and that's why I'm trying to only collect omnibus editions that are closed series. You know, and with things like X-Men, there's kind of no end to it, because even if you're like, oh, I'm only going to get the Claremont stuff. Well, then he came back. Well, then I'm only going to get the stuff that has Claremont in it. Well, then he continued to write for 15 years. Well, and I'm only going to get the stuff that connects to stuff that Claremont wrote. Well, now you got to get everything, and I'm shitting on your whole damn life, right? So that brings me to the idea of only buying things that are specifically an era. And one of the very few sets that I think Marvel has done a really great job on that aren't properly theirs are, I have the first 2 of 4 Alien the Classic Year sets. You know, the modern era is coming out at like an issue every couple of months. I've purchased every issue of Alien. It is so. Oh, you know what? Rat Hole. Mark, that is available. Mark says, "I'd love to find the original '90s 2099 line." Oh no.
Hey.
The original 2099 line is available in its entirety, almost at this point, because it's basically 6 omnibus editions. So keep an eye out, because if you ever see those, they actually get discounted sometimes, especially the ones that maybe didn't have the best initial outing. So things like X-Men 2099 will be available in good discount. So, you know, I don't think I have too much more on this whole omnibus discussion, but I've had a really great time, not just talking about modern comics and the current offerings, but some of the stuff that has been oh no, dude, they're amazing. So Cyborg just said those Alien omnibuses look epic. They are. Definitely check them out online. You can still get a couple of the volumes. Unfortunately, some of them are sold out.
Are the comics canon their own thing? No one knows.
Some of them are, some of them aren't. Some of them contradict stuff. Some of them are, what if the movie didn't have this deleted scene? So sometimes you got to play fast and loose. It's like trying to figure out whether Batman's got a brother or not.
Does Batman have a brother?
Earth 2 Batman does. And that's the original Batman. So then his brother got deleted. So.
Same. Because I ate him in the womb.
Oh, God. I heard that Richie Cunningham had the same problem, but he ate him as an adult.
There you go.
So until Richie Cunningham admits he joined the Donner Party, I've had such an amazing time talking about these comics. One of the things that these comics really do remind me is the endless cycle of what Marvel and DC do is they take characters, they reimagine them, and they put them back into new situations. Whether it's Ultimate Black Panther, which is a reimagining of Black Panther, that is a reimagining of Black Panther, I guess technically. It's X-Men, which is the continuing story that somehow manages to tie back into the same handful of stories from the 70s, 80s, and then kind of eventually the 2000s, but not too much from the 90s. Sorry about it. Or Wolverine Madripoor Knights, which literally ties back to a specific story. And the omnibus lines. Marvel's future really lies in its past, and I really hope they find a way to secure a direct line to what it is they want. Because, as we said at the beginning of this episode, it sometimes seems like they have no clue where they're going.
Yeah, and it makes it really hard to follow them on the ride, but we keep going through.
Well, and it makes it really hard to feel confident financially choosing to follow them because,
exactly.
They're asking you for monthly $4 per title, sometimes $5 and $6 per title. And with these omnibus editions, like we said, $75 to $125 a book. That is a roof. So, we gotta be thinking about what they're asking from us. With Netflix, you pay, what is it, $37.99, and you promise never to tell anyone else your social security number. And every month they give you a few episodes of a season of Top Chef and also some Cheers. But you pay one price and you get all of that. With Marvel, they ask you to pay an individual price to get just this thing and then buy a bunch of other things. So just this thing continues to make sense. I need a little bit more from a company that's asking me to single-handedly keep it afloat. When they got that Disney money, they got that $1.5 billion Fortnite money.
Oh, Lord.
How much could one Fortnite cost? $10?
Well, until we decide to reopen the banana stand and do Arrested Development Season 6. Kevo, it is always such a pleasure having you go on this crazy ride with us. Part of what this ride offers us is a chance to think about the intersection of everything we do. A little trivia fact for you guys. Do you know what unbelievable omnibus edition will be coming out that is relevant to all three of us in October?
I don't.
Godzilla the Marvel Years. So it is always something.
So funny and on point with Dave's comment of saying that he wants Marvel's Doctor Who back in print. There's so many weird stuff. Is that crossover that was between Marvel and DC where they did the Wizard of Oz? Is that available in print?
Yeah.
No. Really? That's beautiful. Such a rich history of comics, everyone.
So, Kevo, it is always so amazing to have you be part of this when, your job as a producer, like a lot of people don't realize this, but a producer's job isn't to be 1,000% on every topic. It's to be ready to interact 1,000% on every topic. And that means that even when your knowledge base isn't overflowing, your heart is. And so it is always such an amazing opportunity to get to interact with you and do the show with you. And thank you so much for producing something where you don't read 30% of the titles, but you're ready to have a good time.
Yeah, and I usually end up learning something in the process, and even if I am completely lost, I do tend to enjoy listening to you two knuckleheads. So anyone who wants to hear more of our extensive comic coverage, I have posted several links in the chat and comments of this video, including links to the playlists and categories of our broadcasts, like this link that's up right now, to our extensive comics coverage. We did stuff like an extended coverage of the Marvel Comics March 2024 solicits. That was exhausting and beautiful, and yeah, it's always fun, and I am looking forward to whatever comes next.
I love that, Kevo. Until what comes next, where can everybody find you online?
You can find me over on the socials at Kevoreally. That is KEVOREALLY. Deke, where can the folks come find you?
You can find me at TK Elemental. Nico, how about you?
You guys can find me thinking this guy is amazing and just loving him. And because, at some point between now and your next broadcast, this guy has a cool thing happen, and we should always think he's amazing.
So grumpy.
It's so funny because Kevo could not believe it, but when we first met, I was like, no, I find grumpy guys really hot. Like, the crankier a guy is, the more it turns me on. So you guys can imagine how hot I think this guy is. But I would be lost without these two men. It is a hard world. It is a hard thing to try and navigate this world and to make media. And it is a hard thing to want to wake up every day navigating this world, making media, listening to criticism. And it can be really hard to want to do those things. And if it weren't for these two awesome guys and two other awesome, amazing men, I just wouldn't know what to do. So I'm always really grateful for these guys and for the comics that get us through. The worst comic that I talked about this week still provided me an escape from a hard world. I have a good life, just it's a hard world. You never want to lose track of the fact that this is a relaxing escape. This is magic. So when people like Tasty Cake, The Rat Hole, Cyborg, Tori, everyone join us for this kind of program. Oh,
and speaking of relaxing escapes, don't forget to check out Nico Action's awesome music on his SoundCloud. We have it playing in the background of every episode. We have it playing at the opening of every episode. We have new tracks going up at all times. And I am going to get on making some videos to put on the Nico Action YouTube music channel, so you can listen to the tracks over there as well. And otherwise, socials, Nico Action, right, sir?
Absolutely, Nico Action on all your socials. But, until next time, we got 6 things we need you to do, but it's broken up into 2 groups of 3, so it's not terrible, right?
Oh, we're going to edit that.
3 things we would like you to do and 3 things we need you to do. Please like, comment, and subscribe. That's optional, right? Not really, but please do it. 3 things we need you guys to do. Number 1, we need you to stay safe. Like we said, it's a tough world, no matter how good your life is. Number 2, we need you guys to be brave, because who you are is amazing, and we want to see that in the world every single day. And number 3, evolve daily, because who you were today is awesome, but I bet who you're going to be is even cooler tomorrow. And until then, we can't wait to see you. So, Saturday, right?